I'm good. Getting back to normal. It was a long trial.
Was it? I mean, so first of all, thank you. I did not expect anybody to reach out that was a juror member, so I do appreciate any insight that you can give me. So
yeah, I'm happy to. We weren't allowed. I wasn't allowed to go online or look at any research or anything during the trial. So I'm just kind of catching up now. So I heard a lot of your interviews and other stuff like that. So I'm just kind of catching up with what was going on while I was kind of in a black box and not allowed to look at anything.
Oh my God! So, wow. So this is kind of. You didn't obviously because you can't be looking at media sources or anything. So you weren't really familiar to who Kaalan Walker, is.
No,
basically.
I don't think any of the jurors had ever heard of him. I hadn't. I mean, I'm a 57-year-old white guy, so I don't really know rap music or anything like that. So I don't think any of the jurors had ever heard of him before. We had to fill out a questionnaire before the case, and it asked if we knew who he was or seen any of his movies or anything. So I think they eliminated anybody who had any kind of familiarity with him.
Wow. Do you mind? Yeah, no.
Have my name and face plastered all over.
I don't even want your juror number out, if that makes sense. If I received, that and that's just because of my own experience with this case. And like you said, you've been watching between the blogger experience, the victim stories, and how this man kind of maneuvered. That says a lot. So personally, I'm not going to put your juror number out or even your name. So I will figure that out. So
all right, I appreciate that.
Yeah, then that's just looking out. So out of curiosity, all right. So because I have so much in my head right now, and I could tell you, I'm like, I cannot believe that. First of all, thank you. But how many juror members, men, women, black, white, Hispanic? What was the makeup of that of the group?
Of the actual jury itself, there were. Let me think here. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 men. So I guess that means 7 women. And I guess there were 3 black women, 2 Asian women, and then me, another white guy, and I think there were 2 Hispanic guys. But it was kind of mixed. There was one of the women was very young. She had to be in her early 20s, and I might have been the oldest person. There was another guy who was probably around my age. So, like I said, I'm 57. So it was pretty diverse. And there was actually one of the African American women was also. She was a little older. I don't know her age. We didn't really talk about. We didn't really talk about anything personal because we couldn't talk to one another during the case.
Yeah.
So I know people's first names, and that's about it.
When you sat there, was this the first time you doing jury duty before? Like, had you done it before?
Yes. It's the first time I've been on a jury. I've been called for jury duty, but I've never actually sat on a jury that decided a case.
Congratulations. I've done both. So I'm like, it's a different monster, isn't it? I would say when you actually sit there and hear the case.
Yeah.
Oh my.
This wasn't a typical one. The judge he said he's been doing this. He's been a judge for 30 years, and this was the longest case that he ever had. So, it was 8 weeks. So,
can you confirm with me the name of the judge? That should be public information. That shouldn't be a big deal.
Brandolino was his last name.
Okay, perfect.
Let me see. I actually have it because he wrote me a letter. Joseph Brandolino.
Wow. Okay. And I'm gonna write this down. So there was I'm not in the same state, so it's not like I could have gone and check stuff out. But even the Van Nuys website it wasn't very informative at all. There wasn't a whole lot of information that we're going to release because of there being minors in this
yeah 3 of the victims, and there were 13 women that testified, 13 victims. There were only charges against 10 of them. 3 of them, I don't know why, because like that woman Jamie that I saw you did an interview with her.
Yeah.
She was one of the first witnesses to testify, but there were no charges against her. So
yeah,
had there been, I mean, he would have been guilty because that one, she was a great witness. I mean, there was like no question. But so I don't know why. That's the legal thing that I guess the district attorney chooses who to charge and who not. But
she went as uncharged. I think that's what they said.
Say again?
She went as uncharged.
Yeah, and I don't know why. I don't know why, because her recollection was really good, and her testimony was really compelling, and we didn't even discuss it in the jury room, to be quite honest. So I don't know how the other jurors felt, but he was lucky that one wasn't charged, because that would have been another guilty verdict, I'm pretty sure.
How long did it take you guys to deliberate? Because they kept pushing back this trial a couple times.
Yeah, it was probably about 2.5 days, maybe 3. I mean, it was pretty fast, actually. There was just so much evidence and so many charges. There were, 11 charges. And so we talked about all of them individually. And everybody was very cordial, and everybody spoke, and people, we all were. I mean, it didn't take a whole lot of time because, well, certainly not on the guilty ones. The not guilty ones took a little longer because it took a little convincing sometime that there might have been some reasonable doubt, which is really the case in most of them, in all of them, actually. I mean, he was very, very lucky that he didn't get more guilty verdicts.
Wow. And the fact that you say that and he's facing a life sentence, or, well, no, not a life sentence, 100 years.
Yeah, we were not allowed to consider sentencing, and I didn't even know it at the time. Again, I've kind of had to catch up with what went on with the case afterwards.
Yeah.
Because we weren't allowed to look at anything during the case. So I didn't know. I mean, I figured it would be a lengthy jail sentence. I mean, what he did was really awful. I mean, it was really, really horrible.
Tell me a little bit about what you remember. The stories. Can you tell me a little bit about, you're saying that what happened, what he did was really awful. Are you okay if we get into that? Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, like, there were 13 women who testified as victims. And then there were some police officers, detectives, and some experts in like sexual assault and stuff. But I mean, hearing these stories was heartbreaking. It was just, these were all very young women or girls. They were very naive, and he made all kinds of promises. And, he had no intention of making music videos or doing photo shoots, or, he just wanted to have sex with them. And he would go on Instagram and look for young women that said they wanted to be models and convince them that he was a famous person that could really help them. And so he would get them to, he'd get them to come over, and then he'd have his way with them. I mean, it was just terrible. I mean, they were all a little different. Most of them, that was the kind of routine, is he would go on Instagram, find a woman that he thought was attractive, he'd DM her, and then say, hey, I want to do a photo shoot with you. And they'd come over, and there was no intention to do a photo shoot. I mean, he had a camera. He'd take pictures. I mean, he did, he videoed a lot of them having sex with him, which was pretty gross.
Did they know they were being filmed?
Say that again?
Did they know they were being filmed or videoed?
Yeah, I think so. In most cases, I don't think anybody, we didn't see it. We actually, in the jury's room, we had the videos that were submitted as evidence, but we chose not to watch them.
Oh my God.
Because it was like, these poor women were violated to begin with, and we didn't need to see it. This was like, and they made 2 of them watch the videos as they were testifying.
Oh my!
We couldn't see them. They put it on like a computer screen in front, and they're crying. And I mean, because imagine the worst day of your life, the most horrible thing that's ever happened to you, and then you're forced to watch it in front of people you don't know, and just, I mean, that was just horrible. It was just so awful to have to sit through that. And there was no point in us. I mean, you know, so we knew he had sex with them. We knew he did it. So why would we have to see a video? But he had tons of videos, apparently.
Oh my God.
That was kind of his thing. I mean, he had a kind of routine. And he would say, in some cases, he said that he had to video it because he wanted to show it to Drake. And if Drake liked what he saw, then they could go to parties with him and all kinds of stuff. That was like another one of his common themes.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was pretty awful. I mean, it was, as I said, you know, we're not allowed to talk to each other, so it was really kind of actually like mentally difficult to hear these horrible stories from people and not be able to talk about it with anybody. Because it was just hard to day after day after day to hear these poor victims tell their stories. And then he testified. He was on the stand for about 2 days. And I mean, most of what he said was just absurd. It was just, you know, it had no credibility at all. He actually he got busted in a big way. So, like, one of the victims was, she didn't even know who he was at the time. She filed a police report. They said, "Do you know who he is?" She said, "I don't know who did it. I was too drunk." And so she said it was a young black guy. That's all she could identify. So then years later, after he was arrested in, I think, 2018, they did a DNA sample and they ran it through the computer, and that came back as a match with that woman from years before. So she had no idea who he was. But his defense on all of these was, well, these are women that want to get even with me because I'm famous, and they wanted just to be with me because I'm famous. And it's like, this woman didn't know who he was ever. They met at a club that she couldn't go into because they wouldn't let her in because she was too drunk. And he said, I'll help you get in the club. And they went around back, and somehow they wound up in the back seat of a car, and you know, he raped her, and she reported it like a day or two later, and they did a DNA sample. So they had a DNA sample of whoever it was, but nobody knew who it was until years later. So anyway, but he claimed that she did know who he was, which made no sense at all, because why would you file a police report saying, I don't know who it is? If your goal was to get even with somebody or get somebody in trouble, you would identify them. You wouldn't say, I don't know who it is, and wait years to find out who it was. So they showed her a lineup. They showed her 6 pictures of possible perpetrators, and she said she couldn't even identify who it was. She said, that's the only one that's about the right age. And it was him. And then they did a transcript. So they did a transcript of that interview. And in the transcript of the interview, instead of her saying, that's the only one that's the right age, it said, that's the only one I saw on stage.
Whoa.
And so he had access to these transcripts and studied them backward. He admitted that.
Transcripts. She says, did you touch? She's trying to get me to.
Mm-hmm.
I asked her for it's on my transcripts. I asked her.
He said, I wanted to know all the things I was being accused of, and I studied everything. So then he said that he met her when he was on stage, but she was never in the club. We don't even know if he performed that night. So that was like a really bad moment for him. That was like, he completely got caught lying.
Wow.
And that was like all of his testimony was sort of cloudy. Now we did find 3 of them not guilty, and that was mostly because the witnesses themselves were not great. They had some strange parts in their story that didn't sort of make sense.
Okay.
And then his explanation of it actually sometimes made a little more sense, even if we didn't believe it. Like one of them, he gave her $200, and we had the bank transaction on an app like a Venmo or Cash App or something like that. And he gave her $200, and she said it was because he said he was paying for the music video, but then there was no music video. And he said, no, I told her I'd pay her $200 if she'd have sex with me.
Wow.
And so then he didn't give her the 200. I mean, we saw the thing and it was like rejected. Like he wound up never giving her $200. And so she went to the bank and she was really upset. And, you know, he said her boyfriend was pissed off at, I don't know. So that was like one of the not guilties, because it was just, you know, when you're dealing with a criminal case and stuff, you got to be, I don't know, like 95, 98% certain when they say reasonable doubt. So that one just, I mean, I think he did it, but there was just too much doubt in there to call that one as a guilty verdict. So,
right. Wow.
But, you know, he's going to go to jail for a long time. His defense attorney tried to get us to be sympathetic toward him, and that did not work. None of the jurors. I mean, because as I said, we didn't talk, and then we got in the room, and it was like, whoa! Everybody hated him. I mean, hated him. Like, and we all agreed he's an awful, awful, awful person.
Not sympathetic towards victims. Yeah. I heard that he was very like. So the way Jamie, when I spoke with Jamie, and this is maybe part 3 of what I'm going to show on what's going on with that side, she said that it was almost like it was just him and her in the room. That she basically almost like did this thing where she had to connect with the person she was talking to, even if it was kind of like going back and forth tit for tat, but it wasn't like it was, she needed to get her information out there, even though he was trying to derail her testimony, and she could feel that he was trying to do that.
You know, he'd ask a yes or no question and then she talked for 2 minutes, but that I mean, you know, he's doing his job, but she was I mean, one of the things that she did, she had texts that were like at the same time. So like she said, like she asked him, can I bring my friend? And he said no. First he said yes, and then he said no. And then he came up with some strange story that they had agreed. They agreed they were going to go have sex, but they didn't want her friend to come, so that they came up with this story that he was taking her to some party. And again, it just made no sense. So she had those texts, and that was very. I mean, you can't explain those away. One of the 16-year-old girls had an Instagram message that said, "I'm 16 years old."
Oh my God!
He said it right there. He had to have seen it. He can't. And then in the end, they didn't. They kind of caved on that one. They knew that there was no way they could say that he didn't know, because he did. And then there was another one. One of the women texted while she was still at his apartment. She texted a friend of hers, I think I just got raped. And so when you have that, that's really strong evidence. That's really, nobody does that as a joke. Nobody says that, you know, to be manipulative or anything. If you say that, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
Something happened. And so that was the woman that, yes, there were 2 counts for her, because first he got her drunk and then he raped her. So it was you know, I mean, once we were allowed to talk about it, it went pretty quickly. I mean, it still took a few days because we went over everything. I mean, a lot of the jurors took really comprehensive notes. I didn't. So we would go, I mean, like one guy he just had volumes of notes that we would go over and stuff, just in terms of what people said, just as reminders and stuff, because it was a long time. But you know, it was, it's just, it's amazing that it was allowed to go on this long. Like, I didn't know until, like, I started reading stuff in the last couple of weeks that, you know, there were like over 30 women who reported ultimately to be victims.
Wow.
This went on a long time, and he did it to a lot of women. And then I saw some strange interview where he claimed that it was a racist cop that was setting him up and paid. I mean, it was just absurd.
Come to find out, the cop, the racist white lady, deleted all my evidence out my phone to show that these women were lying about.
It was just absurd. He didn't say that in the trial. But, you know, he wanted to blame everybody but himself.
With all this, I mean, so you were obviously right there, and he was in there. What were his mannerisms like throughout the trial?
To be honest, I didn't look at him a whole lot because just my eye line to the witnesses wouldn't have him there. But he was, you know, he was involved. He would pass a lot of notes to his attorney. We were all wearing masks for the first few weeks, for almost the last week we didn't have to wear masks. So you couldn't really see facial expressions and stuff. But then when the verdict was read, he was like sobbing. He like fell to his knees and was shaking and trembling and you know, he couldn't really feel bad for him. And, you know, he put himself in that situation. But he was really, you know, he would be, you know, we would be in the hallway a lot, and he'd walk in, and nobody had any contact. We weren't supposed to, obviously. But he had a number of people there every day.
Yes, he did.
I don't know, up to 10 people there.
I noticed that.
I don't know who they were.
I don't either. So, like, when he was able to post on Instagram, because on the social media side, and I don't know, now that you watch some of the videos that we've done, I don't know if you realize like how he was trying to villainize the victims or try to skew the story. Whereas for some of us that maybe have experience, that have, you know, gone to court, that know what kind of the ins and outs of the things that go in there, you couldn't tell me that the reason why you were let go today, or you were let go today and you're not guilty, and there was a racist cop. Like it was everything and anything that he would put out to social media to throw everybody off, to villainize these victims. So I'm just curious.
The victims were really credible. I mean, there were a couple that, you know, there were some strange things that they said that didn't sort of add up, but, you know, nobody's going to go through this if they don't have to. Yeah. I mean, it's a horrible experience to have to relive that moment in your life. And it's like I said, it's the worst moment of your life, and you're going to tell the story over and over and over again. It's really hard, and it was really heartbreaking. And I was really impressed by a lot of these women. These are very young but very strong women. To be able to do the things to go through what they had to go through, to get him convicted, was pretty amazing. I don't know if I could do it. Then you got to tell the story to these complete strangers,
right? So that I understand. So they had to watch the sex tapes, their own sex tapes. Am I understanding that correctly? Two of them did.
Two of them did. Yeah. There were others because he made reference to them, but they weren't put into evidence, and they weren't. One of them was, and they were both because the implication was that they enjoyed it because they were laughing or whatever. And
wow.
Nobody knows how they're going to react in that situation. I mean, if you're nervous, you may start laughing. So it could have, it really, like I said, we didn't watch them. We didn't want to watch them. They were of no value to us whatsoever. One of them was one of the girls that was under 16. And apparently, like, this came up, although I didn't really understand it. He leaked it to somebody online, and they posted it, but then they had to take it down because it was 16-year-olds.
Yeah, they were. Yes, they were leaking them. They meaning it wasn't just him; it was other people in his camp that were leaking them.
Yeah.
Oh my!
And then I saw that there were these pictures of one of the women, like in the bathroom with her like over his shoulder. That was put into evidence. And they were a little strange. I mean, it was a little odd to see that.
Yeah. Oh my!
But apparently, like that was his thing. He took pictures of lots of women, like over his shoulder or something.
So that was a thing that he liked to do. I'm assuming.
Yeah, like that, he said. Like he said that that's what he did to lots of women. I mean, it became like it went viral, and it became sort of his thing where he would. I don't know. I mean, the whole thing is strange to me, but yeah, I mean, you know, he was allowed to do this for a long time.
When the trial was over, like, how did you even stumble upon our channel? How did it happen?
Well, I was curious because there's a guy who like was sort of famous. You know, I mean, he kept coming up that he knows Halle Berry, and that he said he knew Drake, and so I just started like Googling and looking online and stuff, and then I just saw some videos and things, and you know, there was a couple articles in Rolling Stone and stuff, and I was just curious as to what I wasn't allowed to hear. I mean, there were all kinds of conferences and arguments that the jury had to leave, so that, you know, the attorneys would just do that on their own. So I don't know what they were arguing about or what was there. So I was just curious more than anything else.
Wow.
And then that's when I saw that you had that interview with Jamie, you know, that's when I contacted you, because that was great. I mean, she you know, she had to, like I said, you know, it's like a horrible moment in her life. She had to keep reliving and you know, and then she didn't even have her, like I said, there were no charges involving her, which, you know, it was too bad, because she would have got, I mean, again, I don't know everything that went into it, into why those decisions were made, but not because not everybody, there were 13 victims that testified, but there were only charges against 10 of them.
Wow. And she was not one of them. I kind of wish that the district attorney would explain that a little bit more, and maybe that's something that Jamie can let us know. But she did tell me that she was...
they didn't. Now, they did refer, there were a lot of districts, they kept changing district attorneys on this case, apparently. That came up a few times. I mean, I don't know what that means, but maybe they had different opinions on how to, you know, charge it. The prosecutors in this case, one of them in particular, she just destroyed him during his cross-examination. I mean, she just completely ate him up and pointed out every lie that he had made. I mean, his defense from the start was, I'm a liar. I was lying to all these women, and that's why they're accusing me of something I didn't do. And that's a hard thing to get people to feel sympathy for you, if you're admitting from the start that you lie about everything. And so that didn't help. And his defense attorney, he had Shakespeare quotes about like how women lie and how, you know, a woman scorned is the worst. It was really sort of, I'm no feminist by any means, but it was really sort of offensive to hear. I mean,
what?
They got a job to do, I understand, but it was just sort of like, they didn't have to. There's no way that all of these women were lying. It's just not possible that this many women who didn't know one another would come forward with the identical stories. You know, and so if his excuse was going to be each and every one of them is lying, that just doesn't make sense. Wow. If it was a situation like in one of the ones we found not guilty, it was, you know, there were these there were 20 pages of jury instructions that we had to go through.
Yes.
That explained the law and what we can talk about. I mean, it was just forever. And one of the things is if he reasonably thought that he had that she had consented, then we had to find him not guilty. It was reasonable for him to say that she said she was, she was good with it, or she consented. And so, like in one of the cases, she said, she knew what was about to happen, so she told him to go put a condom on, and he did. And like that was sort of like cloudy for us too, because at that point, it does not, by definition, it doesn't mean consent. If he uses a condom, that doesn't mean that she's consenting. But in this case, it just seemed very strange where, she had no problem saying no to other things, but then when it came to this, she said, go put on a condom, and he did. So that's why that one was not guilty, because he may have, in that case, felt as if she had consented.
What about the minors, though?
There's no way.
Yeah, the minors, correct?
Well, there were 3 minors, but only 2 of them were charged as unlawful sex with a minor. One was forcible rape, which was like the others, even though she was only 16, because I guess it's a harsher sentence. So of the 2 there were just 2 of the charges were for underage sex. One of them had that message that said I'm 16 years old. So that one, that took no time to discuss. That was an instant guilty. The other one, she was a really weak witness. Like the attorneys on both sides could sort of manipulate her into saying whatever she wanted, whatever they wanted to hear. But in the end, it was pretty clear that he did indicate that that he knew she was 16. He says he didn't, but he said she said that he told her that she looked older than her real age. Well, you can't say that if you don't know somebody's real age. I mean, if I know you're 30, but you look 20, I might say you look really young for your age. But if I don't know how old you are and you look 20, I can't make that comparison. I would have to know what your real age is. So that one, that took a little bit of discussion. We actually even had part of the testimony read back because, as I said, she was easily sort of manipulated by the attorneys. So the prosecution got her to say many times that she told them that she was 16, but the defense got her to say she couldn't remember if she ever told them she was 16. But it had to have been. I mean, there was really no doubt in the end. She was in high school. They talked about that. She had a friend with her who was also in high school. I mean, it was very obvious in that one. So those were the 2 underage sex. Then there were 2 rape of an intoxicated person. One of which was that woman I told you that they wound up in the back seat and she didn't even know who he was. And then the other one was a woman that flew here from New York for a photo shoot, and he got her drunk. And I mean, she was really messed up. That's the one who texted to her friend, I think I just got raped. But she also said, I have no idea where I am. I have no memory of anything that happened after 12 o'clock today. And then he tried to convince her that she had just, imagined the whole thing, like it never really happened.
What?
But then she went and had a rape exam, and clearly someone had, had been there. So those were the 2 of those. Then there was one that was rape with a foreign object, which is really misleading because apparently your fingers are considered a foreign object. So
Okay.
that's what that was. He just, penetrated her with his fingers. That actually was a not guilty one. That was one of the ones. That was the one with the strange $200 thing and all that. So, and in that case, by her own admission, she told her to stop, she told him to stop, and he did. So we felt like that was she claims that he was just said he was going to simulate sex, not do anything. There wouldn't be any touching or anything. And then he penetrated her with his fingers. But that just seemed odd, to be in that circumstance and not, and not have any sort of understanding of what's about to happen. But again, she said stop, and he did. And so once again, that was sort of that reasonable doubt sort of thing.
Okay.
And then the others were all forcible rape, which, the law is, like all of a sudden I'm an expert because we had to sit through this for so long. But like you have to show fear or force. That's like, there had to be a situation where, like with Jamie, when he took her phone and said, your friends don't know where you are. Unless you listen to what I say, I'm not giving you your phone or telling them where you are. That's fear right there. So that was, there was an incident like that, whether it was force, if it was like him just holding her down just by physically being on top of them. So anyway, those were the bulk of them. And then one of those was a 16-year-old,
wow.
She was the best witness by far. She was great. I mean, she was just very poised, and everything she said made perfect sense. She said she didn't tell anybody because her parents didn't even know she was there, and she didn't want to get in trouble. And when those things happen, you just don't want to think about them. And then there was a notice put out by the police saying, if you've been a victim, call this detective. And that's when, apparently all these women came out of the woodwork. But they all told the same story of stuff that wasn't known. I mean, he always, this is kind of gross, but he would often spit on their genitals. And that's something that many of them said. So it had to be true. If nobody's going to make that up. And even if one person does, you're not going to have 5 or 6 or 7 people make that up. It had to have happened. So, and there were a lot of other things, most of it was doggy style. He was behind them. That was another kind of common theme that, he was always apparently all the videos he was in that position.
Wow.
Except for the one with the 16-year-old, she was performing oral sex on him. And again, they showed that, but we didn't see it. And we didn't have to, it was just sort of gross. Like I said, these poor women had been through enough. They really didn't need 12 strangers
looking at them
watch a horrible moment in their lives.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about what you guys had for evidence? What did you guys have to kind of go through? Because
so in each of the cases there was different, each of the charges. In some cases there were often texts to other people from their phone. In one case there was a text to him that said, "I told you I didn't want that and you didn't care." And he said, his response was, "You were indecisive." And she said, "No, I wasn't. I said no many times." So if you have that, that's really strong evidence, because if somebody's going to lie about that, think of what they would have to do. I mean, they would just instantly all of a sudden concoct this story in their head. And so anyway, so there were we look at a lot of texts. There was money came up a few times. There were money transactions. In one case, one of the women paid him $500, which we couldn't understand. He said it was because she said she wanted him to manage her career, and he said, "Well, okay, you got to pay me $500." Which, as stupid as it sounds, makes more sense than just about anything else as to why else would she give him $500. So we saw the financial transaction came up a bit. The detectives, police reports. We didn't spend a whole lot of time on them because they had testified about it, and we kind of heard it verbally. But we did go through those, and then there were the medical reports. Not some of them didn't, they reported this years later. So there was no point in having, any sort of physical exam. But others did it within, 24 hours, 48 hours. And there wasn't a whole lot there, by the way. But one of the things that all the witnesses, all the experts said is about 50% of the time in a sexual assault case, there is no physical evidence. There's no bruising or anything like that. So it's kind of useless then. It's half the time there's no injuries or anything. Then that doesn't prove anything either way.
Yeah.
But we had to hear. I can tell you the female anatomy like I've never known before. They went into great detail to the various parts and the various areas that can be injured, and it was a real anatomy lesson for one of the witnesses, and it was just about. So you had the 13 women who said what they wanted. You had a few police officers, detectives, and they were just great witnesses because they're very, they're like professionals. They know what to say. They know to answer yes or no, and that's it. To not elaborate. So those were very easy to listen to.
Sure.
There were, as I say, there were a couple of the rape nurses. There was a woman who was from the science lab, the criminal LAPD science lab, that identified the DNA on that one victim. That there was a 1 in like 40 quadrillion match. In other words, it had to be him. And when she said like the population of the Earth is like not even close to that, you'd have to have like 20 times the population of the Earth to get to that number. So it was clearly him, and he didn't deny that it was him. But that's and then the attorneys argued about everything. They just it was just they didn't like each other too much, which is I would imagine that's not unusual. And as I said, look, they're just doing their job. The defense attorney, he said some really things that I thought were really offensive, but look, he's doing his job. His job is to get people to acquit his client.
My understanding is that he's a pretty high profile defense attorney in Los Angeles.
Yeah, he wasn't great, I have to tell you. I mean, this was as a defense attorney probably not an easy case to represent.
Right.
Because there was so much evidence against the guy. I mean, it was over, and he couldn't keep his mouth shut, so he said all kinds of things on. I mean, there was one interview that was entered into evidence. I don't recall what it was even about. But now I've seen other things he did with other people, and he's always blaming everybody else and making excuses, and I don't know if he had the opportunity to plead guilty and get a shorter sentence. But he should have done that. Because,
a plea deal.
Now they're saying it's like, 100 years. I mean, a long time.
Now that you've seen the social media stuff, right? Like, and you kind of lived through this for how many? You guys were there for 2-day deliberation. I'm sorry, say that again.
The case was 8 weeks, and then we had like about 2.5 days of deliberation.
Oh my God. How are you feeling now? How are you feeling now after social media too?
I'm glad we convicted him. I'm glad that he's going to be, punished for his. I mean, I can only imagine how many women there really were, because most women don't report these things. They're humiliated and embarrassed and ashamed. I mean, that's what the ones that did testify all said, and it would be because that's one thing that the defense attorney would often say. Why didn't you just leave? Why didn't you just start screaming and saying, and it's like, that's not what people do. They're terrified. I mean, I think it was Jamie. No, it wasn't Jamie, but it was one of them who said, it was the other 16-year-old. She said, I had one thing on my mind, which is just to get out of here alive. Because I didn't know who this guy was. I didn't know if he had a weapon. I didn't know if he was going to kill me when he was done with me. So I just kind of went into survival mode. And that was like, I can understand that. I mean, it's a terrifying thing. I have a daughter, and, and she wants to be an actress. So it's like, I mean, how many sleazy guys out there are going to try and take advantage of them? And it's like a lot, but not, there are a lot of sleazy guys, but usually they take no for an answer. And this guy, he just didn't. He just would not. He had his thing, and he said, like, oftentimes he would say, "Be a good girl." That was like one of his lines. And, just do what I say and it'll be fine. And it was really not, I'm glad he's going to jail for a long time. I'm after looking at it now, I'm surprised that he didn't get more guilty verdicts, like I said. But it's a pretty high standard to have reasonable doubt.
To meet. It's a very high standard to meet, for sure. Anything you want to share? Because I'm like...
No, not really. I mean, if any of your listeners or whatever have any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them. I'm really, I'm only speaking for myself. There were 11 other jurors, and there were some alternates as well, but they just watched. They weren't involved in any deliberations or anything. But it was an interesting experience. I didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't know it would be this high-profile case. It was in People magazine and USA Today, local news and stuff. So
yeah. How was the deliberation? Would you say, like, I mean, I'm thinking in my head, it only took you guys 2 days. Was there any moments where you guys were like, he's innocent, or there's doubt here? Like,
one of the jurors, she was very outspoken. I mean, she wasn't very shy about offering her opinions, which was fine. It was great. It was helpful. And she and a couple of the other women, actually, it was the women tended not to believe the female witnesses more so than the guy, which I thought was sort of interesting. The women, there was one of the other acquittals that she said that she had consensual sex with him the first time they met, and then she went back a few months later, and that's when he raped her. And that some of the women had some problems with that. It just sounded like, well, why'd she, she was able to do it then. Why'd she go back? And there was some weirdness in her story too. So again, that one turned up as a not guilty. But it was pretty. We elected this one guy as foreman who was like the best. He is a professional meeting organizer or something. So he had us all. He ran this meeting perfectly. He got a chalkboard and was writing all kinds of things and was taking notes on it and have everybody talk. If somebody wasn't participating, he asked them what they thought. So it was a very orderly sort of process.
wow.
I mean, I don't know that it could have gone any faster. It's like the OJ jury deliberated for 3 hours. I don't know how they did that. Just because there's just, I mean, it just seems impossible. We went about as fast as you could go. There was there were some. The not guilties took a little more time because the guilties were like, everybody was like, come on, his story doesn't add up. And you were like, yeah, you're right. And that was that.
Oh, gosh.
So.
Wow. You said that the judge wrote you a letter. Out of curiosity, would you be able, and this again, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Would you be able to take a screenshot of it and I can blur it out, or anything that would help the audience know that I'm talking to a juror?
He was just thanking us for our service, but I'll send you a picture of it.
Awesome. And you can hit me up on IG or Twitter, whichever one, and I'll blur your name and I'll blur
Okay.
everything. This is just because, you know, we're pretty on our channel, we like to show receipts. But
yeah, I get it. I get it.
wow.
Yeah, I mean, the judge was great, by the way. He was so even keeled. He was really very. He would, you know, he told one of the attorneys, one of the prosecutors, because she was going on forever, and you know, he said, "You have 5 more minutes. That's it." Because it was like we were done at that point, and she was going on and on and on, and so he was great. He was very, you know, I don't know. I mean, I was reading that the defense attorney is going to appeal because he didn't allow them to enter some evidence. I don't know what that is. I don't know if it would have helped, but the judge seemed really, really fair.
Yeah. Wow. So then he broke down when he heard the verdict. And they took him away right then and there.
It was read. He was a mess. I mean, he was trembling and shaking and sobbing. First one came guilty, and then it was like then he just went to pieces. In fact, at one point he dropped to his knees, and the bailiff went over and like picked him up and put him in the chair again, so that he had to sit there and listen to it.
Wow. Wow. So they took him.
That was really the only emotion he showed. When he testified, he was so full of shit. I mean, it was like he would look directly at him. Oh, and then there was this one. So this one case was a woman whose boyfriend was very good friends of his, and he claims that like when the boyfriend left, she instantly grabbed his belt buckle and started undoing his pants. And it was like, come on. But he was saying how bad he felt about that, and he you know he betrayed his good friend. I mean he was like, it was clearly acting. I mean it was like so unbelievable that he was this broken up over it. If he was that broken up over it, he could have said no, even by his side of the story. And the other thing, this was sort of interesting. So the prosecutor, when she began her cross-examination, and I just say she was great. She showed a picture of him in some TV show that he had done, I think for BET, where he was on the witness stand as you know, as part of the show. He was in a court and he was testifying, and it looked exactly like the courtroom we were in. And I mean, it was uncanny how, you know, and her point was, you were acting then, you're acting now. And he clearly was.
Wow.
He clearly was. I mean, there's just things he said that were just clearly lies. I mean, they made no sense whatsoever. They didn't pass the smell. When somebody texts you and says, you know, I said no and you didn't stop, and your response is, well, you were indecisive. That's pretty much of an admission right there. And then she said, no, I wasn't indecisive. I said, no, I didn't want that, and you didn't care. So anyway, yeah, I mean,
wow.
it was a well prosecuted case. The 2 women who did it did a really good job.
He kept trying to, so the story, not the story, but the testimony about that he gave about the woman and the, you know, the friend, her man being the friend, right? His friend, and the belt, that situation is very similar to one that he told here on social media about the mom of that woman being a cop, being a racist, being some level of a cop.
I heard that, yeah.
The woman, his girlfriend's mom, works for the court system. She told her mom that I forced her to go down on me, and told him that I forced her, instead of saying, hey, I cheated on you. Instead of her admitting her fault, so what she did wrong, I cheated on you, she lied and told him that I forced her to go down on me. So that when I was on the phone, it was a cop, it was her, and it was him on the phone, and the cop was tracking my location. That's why he never showed up that night.
I mean, none of that came up. I mean, it's not. My guess is it's not true, and he was just coming up with some silly excuse. That was actually that charge was forced oral copulation.
Oh, okay.
And she, well, so this was actually, she was a great witness too, because, and she knew who he was because of her boyfriend. I mean, she knew he was a rap artist, and she was interested in that. And that's why she went over there. But then her boyfriend left, and he came on to her, and she said, you know, I was so surprised by it. And then I thought maybe my boyfriend was in on this. Maybe they were trying to set me up to see what I would do.
Okay.
So that's why she didn't tell her boyfriend, and she didn't tell anybody. But then she wound up actually getting an STD. That's another thing that he did. There were 2 or 3 women that he gave gonorrhea to.
He gave gonorrhea to women?
Yeah, to 2 or 3 of them.
You okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God. I heard there was another blogger here, okay, in the social media streets that I think was capturing the trial. Now I believe they were in the courtroom as well. And they were talking about that STD incident and trying to make a case as to why the victim is lying about the STI or STD. Do you have any thoughts about that?
No, not really. I mean, it was like, it wasn't important. It was just sort of, it's like, you know, just, he's an awful guy, and he's that much worse if he's giving women diseases, you know? So, and he acknowledged it, you know, I guess because if he had lied about it, they could have gotten like medical records or something.
Yeah.
Now one woman said, it was weird because it came up, she didn't out and out say that she gave him HIV, but she certainly implied it.
I heard.
But then he took an HIV test and it was negative, so it didn't come from there.
Okay.
But he acknowledged that he had gonorrhea.
I heard about the HIV piece, and that was this. Well, basically, it was found that wasn't true.
Most of my contemporaries, like I said, we're old white people. we don't really follow that stuff. So, like nobody I know knew who he was.
Yeah.
We all kind of, you know, we knew the original Superfly, and I knew there was a remake, but I didn't know he was in it, or I didn't see it or anything. So,
yeah.
But his career is over. So.
Yeah. And this is probably the one experience you'll be telling for a long time, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Yeah, it was an interesting ordeal. I'm glad I did it, sort of. I didn't need to do it for so long, and I don't need to do it again.
Well, thank you for your service. Well, I appreciate you for talking to me. First of all, thank you for reaching out. When you reached out, I was like, you know how many, because I do have a lot of people that will reach out and will say crazy things, and I'm like, I don't know what to think, you know, so yeah. I appreciate it. When you said something in your message, I was like, I have to make sure that you're when you said I was number, and I said, yeah, this might be an actual juror member, and not some.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, there were, like I said, we had a huge questionnaire to fill out before they selected the jury. So, I mean, obviously there's a lot of people who know who he is, who knew about the case. I just wasn't one of them.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking to me.
Oh, my pleasure. And again, if you think of anything, now you know how to find me. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Absolutely. Thank you. Have a good one.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.